All right, let's get started. I'm Gundars Oswald, the program director, and we've got Richard Dye from the Highway Department. He's going to talk about how he's using software system engineering to help us drive a better around Maryland. Richard, your time.
Thank you very much. It's working, good. Hi, my name is Rick Dye. As Gundar said, I work with the Maryland State Highway Administration, and I'm a systems administrator for CHART, which is the Coordinated Highways Action Response Team. So tonight I want to give you a quick view of CHART and how it's organized and what it does, and then a slightly longer overview of the software packages that we use to try to do what we try to do, and then try to tie that back up with what we're trying to do through systems engineering to make sure that we're able to maintain, because we've been building and building and building, and not just roads, actually a lot of these systems. So Maryland Department of Transportation. So if you start up at the top, or I should, Maryland Department of Transportation is set up among modal administrations. So underneath the Maryland Department of Transportation, you've got the Aviation Administration, which handles BWI Airport, Martin Airport, Transit Administration, buses and trains, Port Administration, the Port of Baltimore, Motor Vehicle Administration, I'm sure you've all spent time with the Motor Vehicle Administration, and State Highway Administration. So we're the modal that primarily handles roads, bridges, tunnels, that type of transportation. Within State Highway, we're broken up in planning and engineering, administration, and operations. Within operations, we've got materials and technology, traffic and safety, district offices spread out around the state, Office of Maintenance, Office of Construction, and we actually have the Office of CHART and ITS Development, Intelligent Transportation Systems Development, is actually set up as an equal office within State Highway with the district offices and the traditional engineering. That's one of the first unusual things about State Highway, is that they decided early on that they would set this up. It was important enough that we found a way to manage traffic on our roadways, not just try to build and maintain our way out of it, that they actually set us up on an equal level with the traditional engineering branches within State Highway. Focus areas for us are incident management, traffic and roadway monitoring, which is not as insidious as it sounds, travelers information, emergency and weather event operations. So incident management, I'm sure at some point in time you guys have seen these trucks out there, and no, they're not owned by State Farm. State Farm pays us money to help us in our mission, and because of that, they get to advertise. But if these cars or trucks ever do pull up to help you, those are State Highway employees who are trained to help you move along when you have broken down on the side of the road or for some reason can't continue. They operate 6 to 18 units, 24 hours per day, close coordination with state and local police. We have a very aggressive clear the road policy in Maryland, and it's state by state that you have to work these issues out. Because when states first started talking about how can we get out there and help people on the roadway, there was pushback from police. You're not police, you don't have my badge, you can't come out here and do this. There was pushback from fire. How dare you come out and tell me where my truck should be and how I should maintain this? I'm the fire department, I'm responsible when there's a fire out here on the roadway. And over the years, what we've been able to convince them is one of the most dangerous places any of you could ever be, and I hope none of you have ever been there before, is broken down on the side of a major interstate. It is incredibly dangerous, traffic flying very fast, way too close to you. And the police officer, when he has to pull over and do his job and do an investigation, what he has to protect him used to be at least a Crown Victoria. That was a reasonably sized car. Now it's a Chevy Caprice of some sort, and their cars are getting smaller and smaller, and that's all he's got. That's why when the fire department comes out there, they'll take the fire truck and they'll block 7 lanes, but they're not doing it just to irritate you. They're doing it to try to make it a safe place for their firemen and their EMTs to work. So what we're able to convince them is, if we can work with you guys and go out there in our yellow trucks, then we've got these trucks with big giant signs on the back. We can go 100 feet back down the road. We can block off lanes. We can make it a much safer environment for you. That got us a little bit of buy-in. And then we went up to management and said, you know, that police officer takes about $1 million to train a police officer, because he's got to be trained on all the laws of the state of Maryland or his particular jurisdiction, as well as how to use a handgun, as well as how to be safe. They get, on average, a couple of hours, one day in the training academy to talk about how to be safe on the side of the road if you stop to try to help somebody. That's not their primary mission, even though it's what they primarily do. So if we go out there, I can take somebody with a good, strong high school education and for tens of thousands of dollars, train him how to be safe on the roadway, how to make a safe merge gore so the traffic can go ahead and merge easily and not jerkily into the other lane, how to make it a safe environment for everybody out there at pennies on the dollar of what it costs for a police officer. And then once we get out there to start working on the roadway, if it turns out it's not a crime, police officer can leave. You don't want him stuck on the side of the road just because there's a car broken down. We can do that and make it a safe area. They can move on and do what they do. So while this is actually a small dollar figure of what we do, this is probably one of the best things we do at State Highway is to get these guys out there on the road to help move traffic along. We also have traffic operations centers. This is the one that's up by BWI Airport where I work. If anybody ever wants a tour of it, it's a great place to come out and tour. It's set up to be a operations center where we can keep an eye to try to do those focus areas that I saw you, determine what's happening on the roadway, communicate with people on the roadway, get first responders out where they need to get. It has an advanced traffic management system we're going to talk about. It has a dedicated state police officer that has just worked with us. During the morning hour and the evening peak, we bring additional state police out so they can sit at the console, because when you pick up the phone and call out to talk to another police agency to ask them what's going on, if you've got the same badge they have, it's a much quicker conversation than trying to explain, hi, I work for the highway department. So we spend money in State Highway trying to do what we can do to work better with these other first responders out there, not to replace police, not to replace fire, but to make it safer for everybody and to try to help them out. Emergency operations are also out of here. During Jonas, during that storm we had last year, y'all probably saw the governor giving his presentation during the storm. That's where he was. We do all of our emergency operations at his facility as well. So if we have our main center here up by BWI Airport, we have a regional center out in Frederick at the Frederick Law Enforcement Center that handles most of Western Maryland. We've got one down at the State Police Barrack in College Park that handles the DC National Capital Region. We have one up at the State Police Barrack in Golden Ring that handles the Baltimore area. And then we have one for the Eastern Shore in the summertime that handles the Eastern Shore. So Maryland, we try to spread out to make sure that we're there where a lot of these incidents and events are happening so that we can help respond as quickly as possible. You've probably seen these things on the roadway, and we're going to talk more about the software in a little bit, but we have things to try to help us determine what's happening out there. The best way we can find out what's happening out there is all of you guys. I've got to admit that everybody out there on their cell phones has not made the road a safer place from a driver perspective, but it's made the road a much safer place from us knowing what's going on out there. People quite freely call 911. We've created pound 77 that we pay for, but it brings to the closest state police barrack. So if you ever see something that's not an emergency, dead deer on the road, a vehicle that's off on the shoulder but doesn't look like it's in any particular distress, if you ever call pound 77, it'll get you to your closest state police barrack, and that's where we have our traffic operations center, so we'll find out right away, and we'll quickly get somebody out to try to make that a much better place, much better event. We find out from Maryland State Police, we find out from our own people. We do have speed detectors on the side of the road that tell us how fast traffic is flowing. Doesn't tell us how fast you're going, but it tells us how fast traffic is flowing in general, because that's all we care about. We also have these cameras out there. You've seen them on the side of the road. Once again, people wonder when they come and visit us, well, do you use those so you can see the accidents? We'll never have enough cameras to see an accident when it happens most of the time. If we do have a camera, it's rare that it's going to be on a monitor somebody's looking at to see an accident when it happens most of the time. The main purpose of the camera is for event evaluation, to make sure that we're able to determine, is it real? Because while we're trying to help the public can also be a little bit of a hindrance to us. We'll have somebody that'll call, and we've had a call that came in and said, yes, I need to call because there's been an accident. Okay, well, yes, sir, where are you? I'm on the Beltway. Okay, there's two Beltways. There's one in Baltimore, there's one in DC. We need to be a little bit, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the Baltimore Beltway. Okay, what's going on? It's a Beltway where US 1 crosses. Okay, well, it's a Beltway. US 1 crosses in the south, US 1 crosses in the, people don't know where they are, or they don't know how to explain to us where they are. So once they do explain to us where they are and they say there's been an accident, we had somebody call in and said there's been a truck has lost its load. Well, to us, a truck has lost its load. We need everybody out there in big front end loaders and bucket trucks. It was actually a pickup truck that had a mattress fall off of it. So the main purpose behind the cameras is when somebody tells us something is happening, we bring up the closest camera to see, can we verify it? We don't want to send the entire cavalry out just because somebody called and said a truck has lost its load. So the cameras are primarily so that we can verify the incident and verify what's needed. If we can't see it on the camera, we'll send one of our guys out there, or we'll call the police and see if they have somebody in the area. We'll do what we can to try to verify it. But if you ever wonder sometimes, you know, these cameras, and are we constantly just looking at people? If you ever come to our office, you'll see those cameras up on the wall and we see the traffic is flowing, but you can't really see exactly what's going on in the vehicles. And there's no need to. That's really not the purpose of those cameras. Traveler's information. You see these dynamic message signs over the roadway. We've got about 350 of those. That's an older technology that's actually dying out. And we'll get more into this in the future, but if you think about the mission we have at State Highway, we need to determine what's happening on the roadway, cameras. We need to get the first responders out there that need to respond, police, fire, EMS. And we need to notify you guys so that you don't come up on that accident. If there's been an accident on the side of in traffic, a lot of times it's sideswiping, a lot of times it's people going in the same direction. It's an accident, but it's not catastrophic. But now traffic is backing up because traffic is stopped, and now it backs up around a corner. The secondary accidents are the most catastrophic accidents we have. That's you screaming around the corner at highway speeds, not knowing that traffic is totally stopped, and then you crash into a wall of cars that you could not possibly see. So the point that we try to make with these signs are to get some way that we can notify you in your vehicle so that you have a way of knowing what's happening up ahead of you. It's kind of dying out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future as far as the future of technology. We have a website. Hopefully you guys use it. We have automated travel times. Those travel times on the dynamic message signs, which I spent a lot of time and effort trying to get out there, and then WTOP spent days just absolutely just dragging us about it. Why are you putting these messages on these signs? It's slowing traffic down. People are reading it. Why are you doing it? Honestly, the reason we did it is we had these signs up there. We only used them when there was an accident. So that generated the first question. Why do you put these $250,000 signs up there and never have a message on them? Okay, that's fair. The other reason why we decided to put travel times up there is we found a way through a private service provider that if we can determine currently today how long it's taken you to get from that sign to a point up ahead, and I can let you know that, now you know that it's 10 miles to this point that I'm referencing, but it's taking 20 minutes to get there. That's not highway speed. Something maybe is going on. I can now make an informed decision as whether or not I want to stay on this road. It's only like a 10-minute delay. I think I can deal with that. Or no, I definitely want to get off this road because it's 10 miles to this point and it's currently going to take 45 minutes to get there. So the whole point behind these travel times was trying to, in an automated fashion, in real time, get word out to people so that they could make their own informed decisions. And 511. 511 is like our website. It takes the real-time information and puts it out in a web format, but you can also call into 511. If you ever dial 511 anywhere in Maryland, it'll connect you to a computer system that we have, and you can talk to it. Here's where I am. Here's what I want to know. It'll give you all the information that we currently have in the chart system about that location. So if you've never used 511, you might want to think about that. And then traffic management, special events, football games, baseball games, things that are going to affect the roadway but are not traffic accidents. We need to be ready to respond to those as well to make sure they don't turn into accidents. Emergency weather operations, we told you about Storm Jonas. If there's ever a major issue going on out there, we can bring people into our statewide operations center, which has redundant fiber, copper, microwave communications. It's got redundant power systems. It's designed to operate unilaterally if it needs to for a long period of time. So how did all this happen? Those are the main things that we try to do with the system. The late 80s and the early 90s, they kind of realized in Washington, D.C., the Federal Highway Administration, and AASHTO, the Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, they started thinking. Computer networks were becoming ubiquitous. They were everywhere. And we called them computer networks. And computer networks have multiple paths to get from point A to point B. And if you ever get too much traffic going, we call it a congested network in the computer world. And if you have a congested network and it gets too congested, the packets collide. They call them collisions. If we can manage all these bits flying at the speed of light across these computer networks, why can't we manage the roadways the same way? And so people started looking into it. Well, it's kind of the same thing. On roadways, we've got parallel roadways, I-95, BW Parkway, US 29. We have cut across US 32, US 1, 175. If we could find a way to know what's happening on the roadways, that's your cameras and people calling in, get quick response out there to clear it quickly, and also find a way to notify the packets out there to take a different route so they don't become that secondary accident, maybe we could make a difference. We just realized that by the late 80s, early 90s, we were just finishing up the interstate system, and we already knew that we could not build our way out of the congestion that was getting worse and worse and worse. So the new thing was called TISMO, which is Traffic Systems Management and Operations. How can we manage what's happening out there, and how can we operate it? The interesting story about that is, about that same time in the early 80s, the state highway administrator got a phone call, and it was the governor of Maryland, Governor Schaefer. Governor Schaefer said, Mr. Kassoff, there are people in Maryland who want to go to Ocean City, and I want them in Ocean City so they can spend their money. And do you know where those people are? They're sitting on US 50 because they can't get to Ocean City. What are you going to do about that? Mr. Kassoff thought about it and said, you know, to be honest, Governor, we're the highway department. We design roads, we build roads, we maintain roads. If anybody operates the roads, it's probably the state police. They're the ones that go out there and respond to accidents. That's probably who you should talk to. And Governor Schaefer, who really loved people telling him no, said, interesting comment, you might want to think about that and get back to me tomorrow on how you're going to operate the roadway, or your replacement will tell me how he's going to operate the roadway. So at that point, by the early 80s, mid 80s, we now had definite motivation to do something in the state of Maryland, nothing like that kind of pressure. So now you're going to start seeing things that make sense to you guys. The federal government came in and said, then we need to help out to make sure that there's money available to start thinking about operating the roadway. So they came up with a national ITS architecture. And that architecture had logical layers, it had physical, it had standards as to how things were going to communicate. They came up with a systems engineering methodology, the old V, of how we were going to go from all the way from the beginning feasibility, concept of operations, and eventually all your way to operations and maintenance. That was a new thing for the highway department. We didn't do things like that. The highway department's got a 25-year view of where the road should go. How do you acquire that roadway? How do you plan to build that road? How do you build that road, and when do you replace it? They never had to think about this type of system engineering methodology. So now it's the world's coming into the way that you guys are used to seeing it. The systems that we currently have in Maryland are an advanced traffic management system. These are the systems that I'm responsible for. A lane closure permitting system, an emergency operations reporting system, a bunch of web-based systems that connect these together and connect them to the internet, and then a mapping system. And those of you that may be in this computer world maybe recognize a enterprise architecture drawing. This is our enterprise architecture for what we do. And you'll notice where they share similar things, where they share the same type of .NET, or where they share the same database, or where they share the same operating system. We, over the years, started with this system being very prescribed, this system, the Advanced Traffic Management System, being very well engineered, and the others kind of came about one bit or another. Now all of these systems are designed, built, operated, and maintained by a part of the organization that works for me at State Highway. So the Advanced Traffic Management System, it runs on a combination of Windows 2008 servers connected to those cameras that I showed you, dynamic message signs, highway advisory radios, speed sensors, remote weather stations, on-off devices that cause the flashing to happen when we want you guys to look at a particular message sign. We definitely are used to track these flow disruptions, put messages up to notify the public, send messages out across the internet, and then notify the first responders how to get out there. Right now in the National Capital Region, there's over 36 agencies and over 91 operating centers that have access to this software. And it's not just us. When we built it, we knew it needed to be more than us. State Highway alone can't do this. So it's the people that I told you about, but then it's also Maryland Transportation Authority and Montgomery County and Prince George's County, BWI Airport Operations, Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., the football stadiums. People that have a traffic management mission, we wanted to make sure that on day one, they would have access to this software so that they could see what was happening, they could help first responders get there, and they could notify the public. Law enforcement is the next step. They want access to it as well. Well, they need access to it. It's not the big brother using these cameras to give you a ticket. That's not what these cameras are for. They can't do that. But You do want police and fire to be able to know how to respond to you and to know that when they are responding, rather than wait till the first fire truck gets there to realize that he needs a special hazmat unit, if they can see this information, if they can see the cameras, if they can talk with all of us, they know what they need to get out there. So law enforcement jumps on board. Highway maintenance, the people that maintain the roads out there, but also the people that are going to bring the heavy equipment out to help you when there's a major incident and you need a sand truck or you need a major front end loader, rather than wait for the guy to get the phone call, get in his yellow truck, drive out there, fight the traffic, see what he needs, get on his radio, and then ask for the stuff he needed. If you can get them this information right away, it makes their response out that much faster. And remember, fast response is what we're going for. That's what keeps those deadly secondary accidents from happening. Emergency operations. There was a day not that long ago that if you worked for the county and you worked for the county EOC, your mission was to watch for the hurricane coming up the bay. That's what a county EOC did. And if there ever was a major hurricane, they then would help police respond, request federal response, get money in to try to take care of the incidents. But that's really what the county EOC did. Since 9/11, the county EOCs are involved in a lot more than you could ever imagine. But they're also involved in major evacuations. They're involved in tornadoes. They're involved in snipers. They're involved in all kinds of things. So the major counties have gotten access to it so that they can dispatch their ambulances better. Information share. Early on, the Secretary of Transportation called the man who wrote the book that y'all are raffling off tonight, Phil Tarnoff. Phil Tarnoff was the president of a company called Paradigm Systems, created computer systems back when they were just welding these computer systems on the boards. And Paradigm Systems became a major player in the traffic management world. He finished that up, retired, and the secretary called him and said, we've got all these people getting engineering degrees at University of Maryland. And they're computer systems degrees, they're EE degrees, they're civil engineering degrees, and then they're all leaving the state to go to California or to New York or all the places where they assume the high technology is happening. When in Maryland, we've got some of the highest tech possible to do this, but the own students don't know about it. What can you do about that? So we created the Center for Advanced Transportation Technology, and we made sure that all of our data fed that day one live by fiber connection. So all the data that we have in our traffic management system, our emergency system, our lane closure system, all feed down to them so that they can then help us share it with others. That way that data currently now in real time goes to Virginia, goes to Washington, D.C. It feeds their systems. It brings their data into us, but it's also available for all the researchers to do the research that they need to do and keep the students interested. And then, of course, the people that maintain your systems need access to your systems. The Chart Advanced Traffic Management System basically looks at incidents. If there's ever an incident out there, we'll respond to it. Planned closures, construction, disabled vehicles on the side of the road, congestion events, special events, football games, air shows, action events. You know, like it or not, if there's a dead deer on the road, somebody's got to get that dead deer off the road. If there's a traffic signal on flash, somebody's got to respond. It's not an accident in and of itself, but State Highway needs to take an action. Weather service events, fog, a message up that talks about fog coming in and you want to warn people about it. And then safety messages, campaigns that are going on right now. Just to give you an idea of events, in 2015, we had 27,000 incidents in Maryland that we responded to through CHART. 34,000 disabled vehicles, 39,000 planned closures, 11,000 action events, there's your dead deer, and 1,300 weather events. So the kind of events we respond to in a year, it's an awful lot of response. Total events for all the centers, if you can see going back to 2001 when we started collecting this data, with rare exception, it's going up and it's going up and it's going up. And it's going up for a couple of reasons. One, the number of vehicle miles traveled by the average person is going up and up and up. The population is going up and up and up. And we're going further off the interstates to respond. You're going to see more of our responders on US 29, Maryland 32, US 301. We're going further afield to try to help because the evaluation is done every year on our system, and the evaluation done by a separate part of the University of Maryland has come back with a $1 billion in savings per year by having CHART, by having that quick response, by making sure that the follow-on accidents don't happen, by making sure that you're not sitting in traffic and burning gasoline, by making sure that all the goods are getting to the store on time and not sitting on the highway burning gasoline. And if independent evaluation has shown that we have We have saved as much as $1 billion in a year based upon that for a program that costs $40 million or less. So it's a pretty good cost-effective thing. So how does an operator use it? When I first started, one of the main things they brought me in, I was an Air Force officer for years. And then when I got out of the Air Force, I ended up in San Antonio at their local system and this municipal system when they first started building these. And we were looking into how to do this. And that's where I met Mr. Kassoff, and he brought me out to Maryland saying, we've got a system where we're really not happy with it. Can you come take a look and maybe look at it from a systems perspective, not just an individual piece of software? And what we had at the time, this would have been early 1990s, we would say, we know that we want to have cameras out there, so we need a camera system. So we figured out how we can get the cameras working out of the statewide operations center. And we knew that we needed dynamic message signs, but we're government, and we have to bid things out. So we'd put out a bid, and this year, Telespot would win. So we'd get 7 Telespot signs and a PC that manages those signs. And then the next year, Mark IV would win, and we get 12 Mark IV signs and a PC that manages those signs, and some other company for the third year. So now we have operators that are trying to use the cameras to see what's going on out there, trying to put messages on the message signs. There's been an accident. Quick, let me put messages up. Okay, message, crash ahead, right 2 lanes closed, crash ahead, right 2 lanes closed, crash ahead, right 2 lanes closed. Now, I can be the traffic manager now that I've done that, because you're the driver on the roadway, your focus is this. I've got a much bigger focus. Let me help manage this accident. Oh, wait, they've opened up a lane. All right, let me stop. Okay, now it's only 1 lane closed, now it's only 1 lane closed. So they spent all of their time dispatching and all of their time going from computer to computer to computer. They never had an integrated system. A manager would come down and say, tell me what's happening out there. And the operator, poor operator, would stand up and say, well, I've got this message on this sign. I've got this message on this sign. He's like, no, no, no. How many accidents? How many disabled vehicles? How many dead deer? What's going on out there? That's what I want to know. So Mr. Kassoff said that. He said, we need to find a way that we can look at this as a system. The current system today, when you first log in, it used to be I logged into my PC and that's what I saw. Now when I log in, I see all the incidents that are happening at my operations center. And remember, there's more than one operations center. So when I logged in here, statewide operations center, there's an incident 50 at the Bay Bridge, there's an incident 95 north at Maryland 100, there's an incident I-95 inner loop. Here are the signs that are involved, here's what's happening with the roadway, and it's a tractor trailer overturned. Now, if you want to know more about this incident, you would click on that link. If you click on that link, now it brings up more information. Okay, this incident happens to be a fatality. It's being controlled by Traffic Operations Center 4, which is the one up in Baltimore. State police are involved. Here's what time it came in. Here's our estimated hours to clear. Being a fatality, they tend to be out there for a little while. While the operator is now typing this information in the background, the computer is doing this automatically. Okay, you typed this in. I know that's in Anne Arundel County. Okay, you put this roadway, here's the lat long for that roadway. As soon as you said that, and I know it's Anne Arundel County, here are the people around the state that are using this software that have said, if anything happens in Anne Arundel County, let me know. So if you're Anne Arundel County Police, you would log in and you would get this information for anything that happened in Anne Arundel County. So while the individual operator is logging in and doing this, the system in the background is starting to do additional stuff. Then you go down, what's happening? It's a collision fatality, there's no hazmat, it's a car, a van, and a pedestrian. Sadly, the pedestrian came out on the bad end of that one. The roadway conditions. Now the system says, you know, you got an operator, he now knows it's open. He now knows this is what's happening, he's put some information in. Well, I told you we had these weather systems out there. So the computer now decides, hey, there's a weather station that is 6 miles away. Let me go grab that information from that system and put it into this event. So this operator will know what's happening. This operator may not ever care that just 6 miles away, the surface conditions were dry and the air temp was 53. But later on, maybe the safety engineer who's looking at how many accidents are happening at this particular place when the temperature is 50 degrees or lower, maybe they do want to know. So the system starts gathering whatever information it can and putting it into this event. Then he says, okay, who's nearby? Have they been dispatched? Have they arrived? So the system starts coming up with, okay, I need an arrow board. I've notified them and they arrived. I need an arrow board, they've arrived. These are the chart units I want to have out there. These units look different. Why do they look different? Oh, they have cameras. Okay, so if they have cameras on board, that'd be a good thing to be able to see what's happening at the accident. And, oh, look, here's how far away they are. We have AVL on all of our vehicles, so we know how far away the vehicles are. So this tells us, oh, this guy's only 1/10 of a mile away. Let me click on that guy and see what happens, and that's what pops up over here. But it's also fire board, investigation, medical examiner, all the people that are involved. Once again, in the past, if anybody ever wanted to know what was happening out there, there was no way to get all of this information without calling the state police, calling state highway, calling the medical examiner's office, call public affairs. So now we've gathered all this information, we've gathered it into a single event. This event can be seen anywhere in the state of Maryland that is on the chart network. Okay, then he's got to think, what cameras are nearby, what message signs, what radio stations. When we first built it, it just drew a big circle and said, here's all of your devices, figure out what to do. Now, the system itself will actually come in and say, here's the devices you should use, and here's the messages you should go on it. Now the system uses that GIS mapping engine that I told you about and actually determines what devices are nearby that are actually going in the proper direction. You wouldn't want to put a message on a southbound message sign for a northbound accident. It wouldn't make any sense. Senior operators would never do that. Junior operator? Possibly. So the system now automatically helps them determine what messages should go out there. It also determines who should be looking at those cameras. As soon as you say, this camera is a good camera for my event, God bless them, I love police. My wife is a federal officer, so I can say all the bad things about police that I want to say. We tried early on to make sure I showed you that all the state police barracks had those chart workstations. And I would go and I would visit the state police barrack in Rockville. And I'd walk in and I'd see right there inside, there's a big monitor that I bought hanging from the ceiling. It's got a beautiful picture of the sun setting over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. It is not in his area of responsibility. It's got nothing to do with how traffic is flowing on the interstates near Rockville, but it was a beautiful, beautiful view of the sunset. So now, by having these areas of responsibility, as soon as an operator says, here is a good camera of this view, the system automatically says, who says they're interested in that? Oh, these guys did? I'm going to send them that video. So if they were looking at the Bay Bridge sunscreen, now they're going to see that traffic accident on 295. So the system is trying to help responders get out there faster. Remember, getting out there faster, cheaper accident, no secondary follow-on, which are much worse, and it gets people moving along faster. And we try to get this information out to the public. So in real time, while we're putting all that information out there, if you go to our public website, which is traffic.maryland.gov, or our 511 website, md511.gov, that's sad, but I think it's something like that, or 100 other places that we freely allow to rebroadcast our video or rebroadcast our data. A lot of times if you go to the Channel 11 website or Channel 13 website, if they've got traffic information, if they've got live streaming video, it's most likely coming from us. We're fine. That is not competition. Getting that out to you guys is why we do it. So it goes out in real time and it updates in real time. So once again, trying to help everybody get by as soon as possible. And then finally, who's been notified? When did you send the information out and who did you send it to? It's kept in the event. This is all in a single event in the system. So if the management wants to know what's happening, they actually don't even pick up the phone and say, what's going on out there? They bring up their monitor and they've got all these incidents in front of them and they can click on it and see whatever details they want to see. How can we let everybody else know what's going on? This was Governor O'Malley's big push, and it was a reasonable big push. But it was frightening when he called and said one of his major goals was to protect Marylanders, and one of his major pillars was, and my DOT will lead the way by using their cameras, which ended up being a phone call to my desk. And when I woke up after passing out, I had to talk to my bosses and say, you know, we do want to protect Marylanders, but we protect them by that fast response, by clearing the road. We're not police. We're not law enforcement. That's not the badge that I have. But we were given the mission to do it. So we started looking into all these different camera systems out there using different types of ways of encoding video. If we can't get everybody to use the same kind of encoder, which we're not going to be able to get, why not find a way to translate that video in real time and send it out in a common format? So we actually came up with a box based on open source. And because thank God we didn't invent this problem. You know, go take a walk down Manhattan someday and look up at any corner and you'll see 20 cameras on the same pole because all the people need the video, but nobody can find a way to share it with anybody. All the video that's coming in gets translated in real time to H.264 and then shared to anybody that wants it. And that can be shared to your operations center, it can be shared to your house, it can be shared to a phone, it can be shared to a tablet. So we came up with a way to do it and then went to state police and said, and you know what? We're going to take this wonderful product we developed and we're going to hand it to you. And you're going to run this because you do have the appropriate badge to now get the county police helicopter and the NSA cameras that are pointing towards Maryland 32 and places that won't return my phone call. So they did. The only negative there is, you know, no good deed ever goes unpunished. They said, that's a great idea, So they took a position that Maryland DOT had and they gave it to state police to hire somebody to come in and do this. So we lost a position out of it, but it made a lot of sense. So now at the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, which is a kind of a fusion center for Homeland Defense that is managed by the Maryland State Police, they now manage this application where anybody in law enforcement or first responders can come in and they can log in and they can bring up cameras on a map, or they can bring up individual cameras. I think last time I checked, there's over 5,000 cameras in that system now between Maryland, DC, Virginia, Pennsylvania's about to jump on board, Delaware's about to jump on board. So this is the sharing of real-time video, not recording, not panning and tilting and zooming, but when that major event happens north of Baltimore, it's not just our problem anymore. It's our problem, but it's also Delaware's, it's also Pennsylvania's. We all need to be working together or we can't get that quick clearance, which is the quick clearance, which causes fewer secondary accidents, which saves lives. Dash cams, we did add dash cams, I told you, to our cars, but then during an accident, here's an accident going on, and this is one of my permanent cameras, and you see the helicopter over here is about to take off. Here's my vehicle with a dash cam, and he's probably sitting right about there. So that's all he could see. So dash cams were good, dash cams weren't great. So we pushed that, now there's a new one. So if you look on our newer vehicles up here, that's a full pan, tilt, zoom camera. So now wherever the drivers go, the operators back at the center can pan and tilt and zoom that camera like any other camera. It's really done a huge, huge service to make sure that we have cameras wherever we need without us trying to build and install permanent cameras every several hundred feet. You know, we don't want to have cameras everywhere. So these mobile cameras have made a big difference. Not very often. Honestly, the biggest sabotage we normally get are people trying to steal copper off of our cabinets at the base of the cameras. The cameras themselves rarely, I don't know, we get that question a lot. I think it's partially because this is the #1 or 2 traffic problem area in the country. I think it's because of that, and I think it's because 9/11 was in our backyard. People around here tend to be less concerned about cameras being out in public space than if you were to go to Raleigh, North Carolina, where they would probably have a bigger issue. So we really, we haven't had that big a deal. Another system, I'm gonna go through really quickly because I wanna make sure we have time for questions. We have that emergency operations system. Emergency operations reporting system, think about hurricanes, tornadoes, major snowstorms. This is a way for us to coordinate our response. Where are the snow plows? Where's the salt? Do we need to move things between centers? And it gives us an idea in real time as to how much a storm is costing us, because that's the question we always get. So it's a reporting system that can help us know how well we're fighting the storm and how much it's costing us. Lane closure permitting. Permitting is just a way to make sure that for all those construction projects going on out there, and we have over 1,000 closures every day authorized due to construction. I'm sure y'all have seen all those going on. I apologize, but we're improving to keep you moving or something like that. My issue was this was a paper-based system. But once those construction projects go out there and they've got their little tiny permanent sign, I want to put messages back on the big signs further back so you've got a lot of notice to get out of the way. But there was no way to do it. So we had to create an automated system that allowed our districts and our shops to put these events out there, to geolocate them, then send that data back to me. So that now when my operator logs in the morning, you saw this screen, he logs in, here's what's going on around him. The very next thing he sees, every permit that is within 2 hours of activating. So he's got this list of any permit that's within 2 hours of activating, he sees it in front of him. So it's in the morning, they haven't activated yet, he can click on one of them. When he clicks on one of them, it pulls the data into that chart event. Here's all the data that was in the permit, what road's gonna be closed, what lanes, who's working. That all gets pulled into our system. And then once it gets into our system, we can look at what dynamic message signs we wanna add to that, what highway advisory radios we wanna add to that. Once they build the way they want it to see, they save it. And then when it comes time for it to go out, it automatically activates and shoots that message out there. So that at 9 a.m., when hundreds of these things are trying to activate all at one time, they've already set them all up. They got it automatically from the lane closure permitting system. And then the HMS pushes it out, which makes you wonder, oh my God, 1,000? you've only got a couple of hundred dynamic message signs. How do those guys take care of deconflicting? Because it's going to automatically shoot it out there. There's not time for people to all talk about it. We built a lot of intelligence into the system, artificial intelligence, to where it can do certain things. So like in this particular case, dynamic message sign 3319 has two separate roadwork messages it wants to have. So the first one would flash up, and the second one would flash up. And the first one, then the second one. But they're two separate events within chart. If one of these events gets closed because it's being managed out of Baltimore, then one of the messages goes away, but the other one stays on because it's being managed out of DC and that event stayed open. So the system is what helps us in such a small, compact area as Maryland make sure that all these thousands of events are deconflicting each other. If you look further, you'll realize there's a third message, travel time, that wants to go out, but we're not insane. We're not going to make you read 3 messages one after another. Now it's kind of unsafe and we are pulling your attention off the road. Oh, there's also a fourth one. Somebody has one of those. Keep work zone safe, slow down, stay alert. So the system now, you can have as many of those events out there as you want. The system will make sure that no more than 2 phases are active on the sign, and it knows how to do it based upon what's the most critical thing versus what's the least critical thing. Trying to make sure that we can quickly respond to 1,000 incidents all at one time, but also make sure that our junior operators that are being hired can act as well as the senior operators who are there. All right, so where are we going? Let's look where we were in the past. Back in 1996 to 2016, kind of breaks down by field devices, software network shareability, and artificial intelligence. Initially, when I first got here, the push was for more permanent traffic management centers and more devices. So during this time period, we really started deploying a lot of devices out there. Okay, but now if there's a lot of devices out there and more traffic management centers, they can't all get on the phone and talk to each other to try to figure out who gets control over what devices. So we started working into the ability to share. And we started off with a thick client, and no big deal, right? It's no big deal that somebody has to go out there with their sneakers and update this in all these hundreds of locations. That didn't last long, but we started thick-based. Old NTSC cameras, alerting and escalations, some of those federal standards that allow us to continue to get federal funding by making sure we're opening up to standards, sharing with DC and Virginia. So we started working on ways that we could physically and network-wise share all of our stuff. Then we started looking on artificial intelligence. Just suggest the messages. If the guy's already typed in that it's a crash, then the first line of the message should be crash ahead. If you've already said it's on I-95, then the second line of the message should say I-95. It's not rocket science to give these operators that are humans a little bit of extra help as far as what messages should be going out. Suggesting cameras, standard operating procedures popping up when they're doing stuff, suggesting the groups to notify. These are all things that are built around the idea of allowing these junior operators to be as productive as the senior operators. So what's the future? Push for more users and devices continues. We're installing a lot of stuff, but we're also getting access to other people's. Counties are installing dynamic message signs, but giving us access to them because they only want to use them when it's St. Mary's County puts them out there for evacuations of the nuclear power plant down there. Well, it's a great idea. We didn't have money for it. They got money for it, but we manage the device because day to day, we're concerned about traffic on 301. So, you know, more and more, it's called share. We don't all have to do this ourselves. It's the same way with things. Highway advisory radios. We have 34 today. We'll probably have 0 of those. The good thing about highway advisory radios is, you know, dynamic message sign, here's the 3 lines of what's going on. Highway advisory radio can give you a whole minute's worth of information about what's happening and alternate routes and everything else. Bad news is it's an AM station. Newer cars aren't even coming with AM radios. So somehow I think that technology is just going to go the way of so many other technologies. What else can we do? Real-time backup, virtualization of the equipment, integration with central authentication, things that we're trying to do now to make sure that we can continue to share this out with more people, and more artificial intelligence, decision support for multiple concurrent events. That's when your system gets insane, trying to figure out multiple events and who gets priority over what. Currently, right now, the HMS it's completely developed by us, by the state of Maryland. 2.1 million lines of code, mapping to anyway. It's a significant amount of effort we've put into that. This year, for major software development, we're funded at $5.7 million this year just for software development. Maryland is one of the few states that'll do that. Most states recognize the problem, but when it comes to software, money for software development within a DOT, they just don't understand it, and they're not willing to do it. So they'll put all the money in the world into building a new lane or putting a new bridge in, but then they'll say, well, we'll give you $100,000 for software, see what you can buy. So Maryland is one of the few states that's recognized the problem and recognized that billion-dollar benefit that we're getting by doing this, and is willing to invest this kind of money. That's new software. That's not maintaining the existing software. So we're getting between $5 and $6 million a year for new software. You know, what is, and I threw these in there, and I do want to talk about these, but also, yeah, sorry. You guys have to go home, I understand, but I love what I do. So what is good system engineering and who gets to decide? Sadly, it's not just me. You know, there's always some kind of state czar, and within Maryland, that's Department of Information Technology. Someone provides the money. About 80% of our money is federal money. So about 80% of this money that I'm spending on software is coming in from the federal government. It's not Maryland tax money. And then how do we do that? There's got to be some kind of procurement law that goes along with it. Well, I got to make the feds happy, and not reading this whole thing to you, but I told you they're the ones that started all this, realizing that they needed to make a way of make sure that we started using good systems engineering. So there is a federal law, came in under T21, that states that all ITS projects funded with highway trust funds shall be based on a systems engineering analysis. And then it goes through and gives you some in-depth as to what that means, but it does leave it somewhat open for how we implement it at the state. And then we have to make Do It happy. How does Do It happy? Well, Do It decided years ago to come up with this software, our systems development lifecycle, that there would be rigorous methodology when it came to software development, and any individual effort over $1 million had to be approved and managed by them. So the fact that we already had the feds saying you must use a good methodology, we were able to say, hey, the state requires us to use one, here it is. And then we went to the state and said, hey, don't worry about us going out of control, the feds are keeping an eye on us. So we kind of played them off against each other, but it's good that they were asking for the same thing. We tie these to our key performance areas within state highway. We try to make sure that at the end of the day, I don't get that $6 million, and then somebody gets the idea that we need the buses to run more on time, and suddenly I get diverted to buses. So we've tied this to the state highway key performance area to make sure that we always stay focused on what we're supposed to do. The original business area architecture was what we did to try to be that initiation, concept, planning, and requirements analysis. That was, at the time, our first contract went to CSC, and they were the big engineering firm, and they were the ones that came in and said, if you're going to do this, you've got to know what you're planning on doing. So we sat down and looked at long-term, what would we need to know for requirements, what would we need to know for all the initial parts of the SDLC, and then put those in a document. And then from there, we would do these individual work orders, and we would track them in a blue book, and that blue book would have task schedules, summaries, earned value charts, budget updates, so we could manage each individual build. So what does that look like? I'm glad you asked. It looks a lot like this. So this was a year, or multi-year, where we would show that it's going to look like, I don't know, let's say a waterfall, to where we would have multiple builds going on at the same time, and while one is at the beginning, one's in the middle, and one's being deployed. And we found that we could do about 3 major builds per year with several minor builds stuck in if we followed this very rigorous methodology. And if you click on an individual one would come up and say, this was our HMS release 15. Here's the guy managing it for me. Here's the guy managing it from the contractor. Here's the statement of work of what it's going to do. Here was notice to proceed. Here was change order. Here is basically the how well are we doing? Are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule? And these are all of the artifacts required for every single one of these. Every single one of these smaller efforts, this is a $1.5 million effort. Every one of them's got to have updated requirements, detailed design, test master plan, integration test procedures, user's guide, training plan, system test procedures, all the way down to things that you would think about from the very traditional waterfall methodology for these projects. Then you go further down and you do how well are we doing versus how well we plan to do, what happened during this month. And then for each phase, from initiation to requirements to detailed design implementation, how many hours we think it's going to be, when do we think we're going to start, when do we think we're going to finish, how many was it really, when did we really start, when did we really finish. We measure it down at that level to make sure that we don't lose control of these builds. And that goes all the way down to the closeout activities. And an updated schedule. The current waterfall methodology is strictly prescribed in these management plans. So I didn't want to I thought about bringing in binders that go halfway across this table, but quality assurance plan, program management plan, risk management plan, configuration management plan, communication plan, that's got all the details of exactly how we're going to do this. So what's next? Because we're not unhappy with that prescribed methodology, but it is very expensive and it's very slow. Now that we've been doing it for 10 years, we're starting a new contract, and we just got awarded a new contract. And under the old contractor, we started talking about Agile. And in February, I attended a federal highway-sponsored webinar, and they talked about the emerging roles of Agile software development, and something from some guy named Gundars Oswald was actually presented at that presentation. And federal government coming in saying, here's how we are going to make sure you continue to get federal money if you move away from these strictly prescribed waterfall methodologies. So the kids are calling it spiraling the V. So we're trying to figure out how to get this and turn it more into the spiral of Agile. We've had good success so far. I like my binders. I'm a little nervous, but it's okay that I'm nervous. The guys under me that do the real work, they're very excited about it. So I just want to make sure that you guys understood what we were doing and how we were doing it. The systems work well. The money's been well spent. The money's been well documented. But we're trying to make sure that we're able to move along and continue this. Maryland is in this for the long haul. We're going to continue trying to make your ride smoother. We're going to continue to try to make it where there's fewer incidents ahead. And if we possibly can, as far as I know, for the next 5 to 10 years, we are funded to continue down this road unless something horrible happens. So thank you for your time. I'd like to open it up for questions.
All right, the question should be with a microphone because we're recording this. Let me ask the first question is, you mentioned that the budget for the software is about $6 million a year. What's the budget for the construction of the roads?
Great question. The capital budget for the state of Maryland, for state highway, not all of MDOT, not transit, not the really expensive stuff, just state highway. Okay. Since we recorded, don't quote me on this. I think I may be wrong, but I do believe the capital budget for state highway this year is $1.5 billion.
So $6 million is just a drop in the bucket.
It is, but if you go to some of the other states, they'll act like that's all the money in the world. They just don't think about it from this perspective.
I have a question over here. Can you tell me how the other states possibly could take advantage and use what you've done already, your lessons learned, and possibly save money as well?
Sure. That one good thing about how state highway works and how the DOTs work that I've always liked is the federal government does not prescribe exactly how highways are run. They've never really had that kind of authority. They've always used things like the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and each state gets a vote in that organization. And they determine things like what makes good concrete and what should steel look like and what should welds look like. They do a lot of that type of consensus building among the states. When ITS started, IEEE got involved, SAE got involved. A lot of those organizations that help set standards got involved. And the states were already talking, so we started sharing amongst ourselves. The code that we built for CHART is totally available for anyone that wants it. And we have had multiple states request it from us. 3 other states have used parts of it in their own systems. So we're trying to make sure that reuse is available, while we also understand that if you're a smaller organization and you can identify exactly what you want to do and exactly what you want to do is available through a commercial off-the-shelf product, then for God's sake, buy the commercial off-the-shelf product and don't try to take my big thing and crank it up into something that just works for you. But if you got any idea that you're going to go beyond exactly what you know, if you go buy something off the shelf, then change orders, if they're even possible, start getting very expensive. So we've started trying to make sure that we form consortiums where we can and make our software that we developed as freely available as possible, because it was paid for with tax dollars. It should be available.
Over here.
Yeah, just since we're system engineers here, just one quick question.
Sure.
What about all the hardware related to the systems that you have developed? Is that another budget, or is that just part of that?
That's a separate budget. And it's relatively easy to make happen, because one thing that Maryland has done very well is the Maryland Department of Information Technology has centralized the procurement into multiple IDIQ contracts for hardware. So if I need servers that are like this, I can just put out a PO RFP, and a dozen people that already have contracts with the state will respond with the exact same devices, and that's how I can buy it. So over the years, we spend a lot of money upgrading our hardware. And sometimes people in the engineering world, the civil engineering world, don't quite understand that either, that in the 10 years that this contract's been going, we went from standalone servers to blade servers to a complete virtual infrastructure. And that was over a 10-year period of time, and it was a significant investment, but it was necessary as we went from a system that did this much to a system that did this much to a system that did this much. So hardware is the easiest thing that we do, because we have an awful lot of choice that we can get that's already been contracted and is available for us. And I have a really good systems engineer. I've got my software guys, my project management guys. I've got one network engineer, and he's the one that keeps us straight on that.
Great. Rick, fascinating presentation. Thank you for that. If the road ahead looks anything like Google's, it'll be populated with lots of driverless vehicles.
Yep.
What do you think the impact will be to a system like this?
The last 2 legislative sessions have put forth bills for autonomous vehicles. There's 2 parts to this. In the autonomous vehicles, people are now starting to talk about that in Maryland, because that's more of a legal thing. Can we allow it, and where would we allow it? But before that ever happens, there's another thing that's part of that federal architecture called connected vehicles. What they want to do is the vehicles need to connect to the infrastructure so that they can pass information to us. If I don't need to have speed sensors out there if every car is telling me how fast it's going. I don't need to have cameras out there if every car is telling me that they've crashed and their airbags have deployed. So for years, they've been working on this idea of how do we connect the vehicles to the roadside, and then somebody else came up with an even better idea. How about the vehicles connect to each other? Because if the vehicles connect to each other, when a car crashes up front, if it quickly sends information to the next car back, next car back, next car back, that quickly makes its way miles back to notify you that you need to slow down because over this hill, all the cars have stopped. The government got involved, and we're going to be involved in we need to build that infrastructure to receive these signals. Because right now, for safety reasons, the federal government does not trust cellular for that. So they're looking at a government-owned network. Sadly, they're not willing to pay for that. So they said, states, you guys can do that. And the state said, oh. So that really slowed down. But the minute that slowed down, the SAE and the car dealers, they sped up. So they're already working. And yeah, Toyota's just talking to Toyota and Ford's just talking to Ford, but they've got these vehicle-to-vehicle signals ready to go. And the government has at least stepped in and said, okay, if you're going to do it, here's at a minimum what your car needs to tell. Direction it's going, is it yawing one way or another, is it braking, is it, they came up with this list of things that 10 times every second the car is going to send all that data out. So I've started going to classes about connected vehicles, because that is going to fall into something I'm going to need to do pretty quickly. You're going to see connected vehicle applications in 3 years or less. You're going to see some level of it. I think autonomous vehicles are going to be quite a bit behind that, because autonomous vehicles, as smart and as good as they get, your autonomous vehicle needs to deal with badly striped roads. They need to deal with, we've got a construction zone and the low bid construction guy didn't have a right lane ending thing. So he just took a left lane ending thing and turned it upside down. I'm sure you've never seen that on the road before. The vehicle would need to figure all that out. The vehicle would need to figure out what happens when the light says don't go, but a policeman is going like this. So the autonomous widely out there is much further off. Autonomous in certain areas, I think you're going to see that in 5 to 10 years. Yes, sir.
I have a question. What awareness or participation do you have with the federal government's FirstNet, which is for first responders, and I believe it's funded by the FCC? It
did. Maryland actually was one of the main winners when it came to submitting FirstNet. So for the last 5 or 6 years, we have been deploying a 700 megahertz system across the entire state of Maryland to make sure that the state police and the county police and fire and EMS and state highway and all of us can communicate together. We are one of the leaders in FirstNet in Maryland. Eastern Shore is complete. We're complete now up to about Frederick County, and we're marching west. So we are a major user of that. That kind of person-to-person communication is critical for first responders, and many, many bad things happen here. We've got to have our first responders talking.
We have the last question right here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, couple of things relative. You just answered one question relative to linking by some audible communications. If you have opposite lane problem and you have gazers, and then you end up in tailgating accidents, so you have to warn people to slow down. AM radio doesn't do that.
Right.
Give the reminders. The other thing is when you have dangerous sunset conditions, you could really use GPS and geographic information systems to say what roads at what times during certain times of the year where you will have issues there and slow down and look at the accident records. Insurance companies may have them in the state database.
Well, but before you go to the next one, the two good things about what you just said is both of those instances, audible alerts, as well as GPS related things that are happening around you, are in vehicle things, which the manufacturers are already moving forward with. They don't have to wait for government. So you're going to see a lot of the things that shake the car seat that you're sitting in, or give you a heads up display alert. Or I noticed on the way in this morning, I drive a Volt, and as I was driving in this morning, I have automated headlights, but it wasn't dark enough for them to come on, but I turned on my windshield wipers and they came on automatically. And I thought, oh, some smart guy just connected that. So the vehicle manufacturers are moving way ahead on those safety type things.
Yeah, well, you know, headlights. Back in the mid-50s, Cadillac had beam control, if you recall.
Right.
But I don't think they have that anymore in most of the
They
vehicles.
do track now with your turn. A lot of them will
that
track
was
with
a
the turn.
Tucker. Yeah, and the other issue, you know, when you're talking about, well, we used to have choppers, traffic patrols. Do they expect to have drones when they have better regulations at some point to also assist?
People in my industry around the country are getting heavily into drones. Even if they do it, you won't see it here, just because drones can't fly this close to so much restricted airspace.
Okay.
You would find
Last thing, maintenance and upgrades. Do you really have a way to track ethics and, you know?
Yes, sir, we do. That's a big deal.
One quick question or comment. You talked about all those documents.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to Gundars about model-based system engineering as well. That'll help you with having 47 documents being produced.
All right, so right now we're going to do the drawing. Thank you, Rick. That was a great presentation.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Very good, great. And thank you all for coming. We're going to do the drawing for the raffle now. If you haven't put your ticket, does everybody have a ticket? Anybody need one? Oh, we need a ticket up here. Wait. We need a ticket. Come on, let's get a ticket. Ticket. All right, and we'd also like to thank Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab for allowing us to meet here and host this event tonight for us, okay. Coming, running. This is a lucky ticket. Good, Jim. All right. Yeah, you better win it now. I had to work for that.
All right. Am I supposed to pull the one that's taped down here? Is that what I'm supposed to
Yeah,
do?
the one.
Last three are 446. Somebody was close. All right.
Thank you. Okay, come on down and get your prize. We have the road ahead,
Pardon? Okay. You bet.
and you have to do a book report.
I did say there would be a report. We trust you. Here, appreciate it.